You know what's genuinely disturbing? You can buy a house in Australia for $50,000, sometimes $40,000, sometimes less. And the reason you can do that is because some Australian towns have living conditions that aid organisations would flag as humanitarian concerns if they were in Southeast Asia. We are talking homes without running water, no sewerage, no doctor within 2 hours, roads that destroy vehicles, schools that closed years ago, employment rates that would make a developing nation wince. This is not just outback remoteness. This is systemic failure in a country with a $1.7 trillion economy and the world's 13th highest GDP per capita. Here is the thing. We are told Australia is the lucky country. Strong social safety net, universal healthcare, fair go for everyone. That is the marketing. That is not the reality for everyone. And today, I'm going to show you 12 Australian towns where the gap between our national self-image and actual living conditions is so wide you could drive a road train through it. At number 12, we have Norseman in Western Australia. Population 643, down 57% since 2006. That's not a typo. More than half the town has left in less than 20 years. It sits 725 kilometres from Perth and 200 kilometres from Esperance. You can buy a house here for $25,000. That's less than a new Toyota Corolla. Norseman was founded in 1894 during the gold rush. Legend has it, the town was named after a horse that kicked up a gold nugget. At its peak, 5,000 people lived here. The Central Norseman gold mine was the economic engine for over a century. Then in 2014, with gold prices dropping, the mine went on care and maintenance. It never fully reopened, and when the mine shut, the town started dying. I spoke with a former resident who was interviewed by ABC Goldfields. She described it like someone turning off the lights. People who could leave did. Those who stayed were mainly the ones who could not sell their houses for enough to buy elsewhere. Here is what $25,000 gets you. A 3 or 4 bedroom older home on a large block, likely requiring significant renovation. The hospital with emergency services is 2 hours away in Esperance. There is no permanent doctor, just visiting GP services, 1 general store, 1 fuel station, no bank branch. The catch is brutal. You need a car because there is no public transport. You will drive 200 kilometers for medical care. And if you ever need to sell, good luck finding a buyer. At number 11, we have Collinsville in Queensland. Population 1,487, down from a peak of over 3,000 when coal was king. It is 85 kilometers inland from Bowen and 150 kilometers from Mackay. Houses regularly list for $35,000 to $50,000. Collinsville was founded in 1919 as a coal mining town. In 2013, Glencore closed the local mine entirely. During the closure, houses sold for as low as $65,000. They have not recovered much. A long-term resident described remembering when the town had everything: doctors, dentists, shops, a picture theatre. Now you drive to the coast for anything. Young families cannot stay even if they want to. A property investor wrote in an online forum about buying a house for $40,000, thinking it was a bargain, then discovering there is no one to rent to because there are no jobs. He is stuck with it now. These 2 towns show what happens when mining leaves. The houses are cheap because the market knows something that optimistic buyers might not want to hear. At number 10, we have Tara in Queensland. Population 941 in the town itself, and about 3,000 in the wider district. It is 300 kilometres west of Brisbane and 100 kilometres from Dalby. Houses often list from $50,000 to $70,000. But here is what makes Tara different. This is not about an industry that left. It is about an industry that arrived. Tara was founded in the 1870s as an agricultural service centre. beef cattle, grain, cotton. A steady farming community for over a century. Then came coal seam gas. The coal seam gas industry expanded rapidly through the Western Downs in the 2000s. It brought jobs. It also brought wellheads across the landscape. And it brought something else. In 2011, ABC Four Corners ran an investigation called the Gas Rush. They documented Tara residents who could light their bore water on fire. Methane was coming up through their water supply. Residents reported changes to bore water, health concerns, and uncertainty about whether their water was safe to drink or their air was safe to breathe. I spoke with an affected landowner during that Four Corners coverage. They described being told coal seam gas was safe, and then not knowing if their water was safe to drink or their air was safe to breathe. Let me be clear about the complexity here. The gas industry disputes many contamination claims. The science is contested. Some families stayed and adapted. Some took compensation and left. Some are still fighting, but the property market has rendered its verdict. Houses near coal seam gas operations in the Tara district sell for far less than comparable properties elsewhere. The uncertainty itself has a price. The nearest hospital is in Dalby, an hour away. For serious cases, you are looking at Toowoomba, over 2 hours. General practitioner services are limited. The roads are damaged by heavy coal seam gas traffic. The community is divided over the industry. Some people have jobs because of gas. Some people left because of gas. Neighbours who have known each other for generations find themselves on opposite sides. One resident who sold and left described it in an online forum. They sold for a loss and got out. They could not prove the health issues were from the gas, but they were not willing to stay and find out. By then, the house was worth almost nothing. The catch in Tara is that you might be buying into ongoing industrial disputes, uncertain water quality, and a community fractured by development. The cheap houses reflect that nobody really knows what the long-term impacts will be. At number 9, we have Bourke in New South Wales. Population 2,238, down from over 3,500 in the 1990s. It sits 800 kilometres from Sydney, 370 kilometres from Dubbo. Houses are available from $45,000 to $70,000. Bourke is the town that defined a phrase. When Australians say back of Bourke to mean the middle of nowhere, this is the place. It was founded in 1835 as a river port on the Darling. In its heyday, it was a major pastoral service centre. Wool came down the river on paddle steamers. The town thrived on sheep, cattle, cotton, and river trade. Then the railway bypassed the town. River trade ended. Agricultural mechanisation reduced the workforce. Drought cycles hit hard. The population started falling and kept falling. As people left, services closed. As services closed, more people left. The spiral has been running for decades now. But here is what makes Bourke different from a simple declining agricultural town. It has some of the highest welfare dependency rates in New South Wales. Crime rates are elevated, including domestic violence, property crime, and assault. Aboriginal residents have life expectancy 10 to 15 years below the national average. That gap is comparable to what you see between wealthy and poor nations globally. I talked to a local Aboriginal elder on ABC coverage who described young people not seeing a future. No jobs, nothing to do. The town keeps losing services. They are supposed to close the gap, but the gap keeps getting wider. A business owner who spoke to regional news had watched the town shrink for 30 years. Every time something closes, whether a shop or a service, more people leave. Then more things close. Nobody moves here anymore, except for government jobs. The infrastructure tells the story. Town water comes from the Darling River, which experienced severe water quality crises during the 2019 to 2020 fish kills. The town had to truck in water at times. Power comes via long transmission lines, and outages are not uncommon. The hospital has limited services, with full hospital care 4 hours away in Dubbo. The catch in Bourke is stark. You are buying into a town 800 kilometres from Sydney with high crime, limited healthcare, significant social challenges, and an economy that depends largely on government services and welfare. The house might be cheap, but living there is not. At number 8, we have Broken Hill in New South Wales. This one is different. The population is 17,388. It's a proper city, Australia's first heritage-listed city, actually. BHP was born here. At its peak, over 35,000 people lived here when the silver, lead, and zinc mines were running full bore. The city once produced 10% of the world's silver. Now you can buy houses for $50,000 to $80,000 in outer areas. The median is around $175,000, which sounds reasonable until you understand the context. Broken Hill is 1,160 kilometres from Sydney. That's further than Sydney is from Melbourne. But here is the absurd part. Adelaide is only 500 kilometres away. So this New South Wales city is closer to the South Australian capital than to its own state capital. It runs on South Australian time. When something goes wrong that requires specialist care, you are more likely to be flown to Adelaide than Sydney. And in 2019, something went very wrong. Broken Hill nearly ran out of water. I spoke with a long-term resident who was interviewed by ABC's 7:30 report. They described nearly running out of water. In Australia, in 2019, a city of 20,000 nearly ran completely dry. If that doesn't tell you something's broken, nothing will. The water supply comes via pipeline from the Moree River. During the drought, storages dropped to 10% capacity. An emergency pipeline was fast-tracked. Without it, the city faced running completely dry. Think about that. A city in one of the world's wealthiest countries in the 21st century nearly turned off the taps entirely. The government responded with significant infrastructure spending. The immediate crisis was averted, but it revealed something fundamental about Broken Hill's vulnerability. Climate change is making droughts more severe. The mining industry continues its long decline. The population has fallen from 30,000 to 17,000. Young people leave for Adelaide or the coast because opportunities are limited. A real estate professional told regional media, "You can buy a house here for what a car costs in Sydney." Beautiful heritage homes for under $200,000, but they are 12 hours from Sydney and 5 hours from Adelaide. Most buyers are retirees escaping city prices or remote workers who do not need to be anywhere. The catch with Broken Hill is that it has genuine appeal. Stunning heritage architecture, art galleries, a real community with real services. But the water security was only recently resolved. Mining is winding down. Nothing has fully replaced it. Broken Hill demonstrates that even places with real infrastructure can be one drought away from catastrophe. At number 7, we have Moree in New South Wales. The population is 7,383. It is 640 kilometres from Sydney and 350 kilometres from Brisbane. The median house price is around $230,000, which does not sound like it belongs on this list. But houses in certain areas go for $80,000 to $120,000. The reason for that price gap tells you everything you need to know about Moree. Moree is famous for its artesian hot springs. Tourists come from across Australia to soak in the thermal baths. The cotton industry is massive. Pecans, wheat, livestock. There is actual money here. It is a productive agricultural town with genuine economic activity. So why is it on this list? Because Moree is 2 towns in one, and depending on which one you live in or buy into, you will have completely different experiences. A business owner described it to regional news. There is the town where cotton money flows and people have nice houses by the river. And there is the other Moree, where nothing has changed in 50 years. except it has gotten worse. The divide in Moree runs along socio-economic and racial lines. Aboriginal residents have unemployment rates far higher than the overall unemployment rate of 12%. Health outcomes are significantly below average. Some areas have elevated crime, property damage, and social issues. Other areas are lovely country town living. Someone who grew up in Moree and left described it in an online forum. They left as soon as they could. Not because of the town itself. The artesian baths are lovely. The countryside is beautiful. The community is strong if you are in the right part of it. But the divide is real, and the crime is real. You learn which areas not to go to after dark. This is what makes Moree's cheap houses cheap. In the desirable areas, houses are not cheap at all. The affordable properties are in areas affected by crime, social issues, and neglect. The price reflects which side of the socio-economic divide you are on. The catch is that the artesian baths are genuinely excellent and the country is genuinely productive. Cheap houses are cheap because of their location within a divided town. The price is not random. It is a signal. At number 6, we have Leigh Creek in South Australia. Population 211, down from over 2,000. And this one is unlike anything else on this list because Leigh Creek is not declining. It is being deliberately demolished. The town was purpose-built in the 1980s to replace the original Leigh Creek, which was flooded for mine expansion. It was designed as a modern mining town with good houses, good schools, and a strong community. For decades, it supplied coal to the Port Augusta power stations. Then in November 2015, Alinta Energy closed the Leigh Creek mine. The power stations followed. And without the mine, the town had no economic purpose whatsoever. The government made a decision. Rather than maintain a town with no reason to exist, they decided to close it. Houses were not sold. They were purchased by the government and demolished. Street by street, Leigh Creek is being erased. Services are being progressively disconnected. Water, sewerage, and power are being switched off block by block as the demolition proceeds. A remaining resident spoke to ABC in 2021. They described watching their town disappear, houses around them being demolished, neighbours gone, shop gone, school gone. But they are still there, because where else do they go at their age? A former resident who had lived there for 20 years told news media the same story. Good schools, good community, decent houses. Then the mine closed, and within a year, they had to leave. The house was worth nothing. The government gave them relocation help, but it was not enough to buy the same anywhere else. The nearest hospital is over 3 hours away. There is no GP, no shops, no school, no bank. The remaining residents, mostly elderly, must travel for everything. Here is what makes Leigh Creek important to understand. You cannot buy here. The houses are not for sale because they are being knocked down. This is not a property opportunity. It is a case study in what happens when a company town loses its company and the government decides the answer is erasure rather than transition. Leigh Creek demonstrates something profound about how Australia values remote communities. When they are economically productive, they exist. When they are not, they get demolished. At number 5, we have Tennant Creek in the Northern Territory. The population is 3,062. It sits 500 kilometres from Alice Springs and 1,000 kilometres from Darwin. Houses can be found from $50,000 to $100,000. Tennant Creek made national news in 2018 for reasons that should shame the country. A toddler was assaulted. The case exposed what everyone locally already knew. Generations of government failure had created conditions that the Northern Territory Chief Minister explicitly called Third World. That is not my characterization. That is an elected state leader describing conditions in their own jurisdiction. The town was founded in 1934 after a gold rush. It became a regional centre for pastoral and mining industries. But the primary issues are not about industry decline. They are about chronic underfunding and policy failure for the Indigenous population who make up the majority of residents. An Indigenous elder spoke to ABC during the 2018 crisis coverage. They described being forgotten. Reports get sent. Announcements get made. Nothing changes. Their kids are living in houses with no water. 15 to 20 people in one house. In Australia, this should not be happening. A doctor who worked in Tennant Creek wrote in a medical journal that the conditions would have prompted an international aid response if they were in a developing country. Rheumatic heart disease, scabies, preventable infections, third world conditions in a first world nation. The statistics are damning. Housing overcrowding averages 17 people per house in some Indigenous housing. Those are houses built for 6 people. Life expectancy is 20 years below the national average. Chronic disease rates are among the highest documented anywhere in the developed world. These are metrics comparable to the gap between Australia overall and the poorest nations on Earth. Billions of dollars have been spent over decades on various intervention programs, alcohol restrictions, emergency responses, increased funding announcements. The outcomes have been limited improvement in core indicators despite multiple declared emergencies. The catch with Tennant Creek is that you are buying into a town where national news documented third world conditions, where governments have failed for generations, and where social issues are severe. Unlike the mining towns, the systemic failure here is the story. At number 4, we have Wilcannia in New South Wales. Population 745. Down from over 3,000 during the paddle steamer era when it was called the Queen of the Darling. It is 200 kilometres from Broken Hill and 960 kilometres from Sydney. Houses, when available, sell for $25,000 to $40,000. Wilcannia made news during COVID for a reason that should be impossible in Australia. When health authorities told residents to wash their hands and isolate at home, many could not. Their taps did not work. Their toilets did not work. In 2021, during the pandemic, an estimated 20 to 30% of houses in Wilcannia lacked functional water connections. A resident spoke to ABC during the outbreak. They said they were told to wash their hands and stay home. The tap did not work. The toilet did not work. There are 15 people in the house. How are they supposed to isolate? A community health worker said they had to bring in water trucks during COVID because people could not wash their hands. In Australia, in 2021, houses without running water. This was not a new problem. It had been like this for years. COVID just made people notice. The town's history explains part of this. It was founded in 1859 as a major inland port. When the railway bypassed the town, river trade ended. The pastoral industry mechanized. The population collapsed and services withdrew. The council became so under-resourced that basic infrastructure maintenance simply stopped happening. But the depth of the failure goes beyond neglect. The UN Special Rapporteur on Housing compared conditions in communities like Wilcannia to developing nations. Houses without running water are a basic indicator the UN uses to measure development. Australia fails that test in some communities. The government response after COVID included $80 million announced for housing. Progress has been limited and the conditions remain poor. The catch is, you might buy a house that does not have working water, even in 2024 in Australia. The price reflects conditions that would be considered a humanitarian crisis anywhere else. At number 3, we have Woorabinda in Queensland. Population 957. It is 170 kilometres from Rockhampton. Unlike many other towns on this list, there is no real property market here. Housing is largely government-owned, so you cannot just buy your way in. Woorabinda was established in 1927 as an Aboriginal reserve. People were forcibly relocated from multiple traditional areas. It was designed as a self-sufficient settlement, but instead it became a case study in chronic underfunding that has lasted nearly a century. A community elder told ABC that they have been waiting for new houses since they were young. Their children have been waiting their whole lives. Now their grandchildren are waiting. How many generations have to wait? Overcrowding is severe. An average of 8 to 10 people live in each house. Some houses have 20 people, even though these homes were built for 6. Life expectancy is 17 years below the national average. Rheumatic heart disease, a condition essentially eliminated in the rest of the developed world, still persists here. A health worker wrote in a medical publication about treating third world diseases. Children catch these infections in overcrowded housing, where illnesses spread easily. It is preventable. We just do not prevent it. The reality for Woorabinda is that this is not about property bargains. It is about government failure, measured in generations. People live in third world housing conditions because governments have not built enough houses for 50 years. At number 2, we have the APY Lands communities in South Australia. Amata, Pukatia, Mimili, and other communities. About 2,500 people live across multiple communities. They are 460 kilometres from Alice Springs and over 1,000 kilometres from Adelaide. You cannot buy here because the land is inalienable Aboriginal freehold. It was returned to traditional owners in 1981. It cannot be sold. This is not about cheap housing opportunities. It is about the starkest life expectancy gap in Australia. People on the APY lands die 20 years younger than other Australians. Let me say that again. 20 years. That is the same gap you see between Australia and the poorest nations in Africa. An Anangu elder made a public statement about still waiting for what was promised when they got their land back. Houses, health, schools that work. They got their country, but they did not get what they need to live on it properly. A doctor who worked on the APY lands wrote in a medical journal that the health conditions are comparable to those in developing countries. The difference is, this is supposed to be one of the world's richest countries. These are Australian citizens. The South Australia coroner compared conditions in some communities to refugee camps. The United Nations Special Rapporteur has documented conditions. Multiple emergencies have been declared. Billions have been spent across decades of programs. The gap has not closed. At number 1, we have Aurukun in Queensland. Population 1,328. It is 200 kilometres from Weipa and 900 kilometres from Cairns, making it highly isolated. Roads are cut off during the wet season for months. Housing is government controlled. There is no property market. Aurukun is number 1, not because conditions are necessarily worse than the APY lands, but because it represents the starkest example of the gap between Australia's self-image and reality. Schools have been closed multiple times because teachers had to be evacuated. 2016, 2018, 2022. The cycle repeats. A community leader spoke to ABC during the 2022 school crisis. They keep evacuating teachers, closing schools, declaring emergencies, but nobody is fixing why it happens. The kids need school. The community needs help that actually works, not more fly-in experts who leave. A former teacher said they wanted to help and believed in the community, but the violence was daily. The trauma was everywhere. The resources were nothing. They left for their own safety and still feel guilty about the kids left behind. A Queensland government official acknowledged in inquiry testimony that government response over decades has not achieved the outcomes the community deserves. The cycle of crisis and intervention has not broken. They need a different approach. Housing overcrowding ranges from 12 to 20 people per house. The life expectancy gap is among the largest in Australia. Chronic disease rates are extremely high. There is an ongoing mental health crisis and documented concerns about youth suicide. During the wet season, the community is completely cut off by road for months, with only air access. The hospital is 3 hours away in Weipa when the road is open. During the wet season, it is the Royal Flying Doctor or nothing. The government has tried. Multiple state emergencies have been declared. There have been school closures and evacuations, alcohol management plans, the Cape York Welfare Reform Trial, and multiple inquiries. Hundreds of millions have been allocated across various programs. The outcomes have been cyclical crisis. Improvement has been temporary. Underlying conditions persist. Here is what we need to understand about all 12 of these towns. Everyone has people who were born there, who have family there, whose ancestors are buried there. They did not choose to lose their hospital. They did not ask for contaminated water. They did not vote to close their school. They did not create overcrowding by refusing to build houses. They are Australians living in un-Australian conditions because successive governments decided their communities were not worth maintaining. That is not bad luck. That is policy failure. The people paying the price are the most vulnerable Australians, remote residents, Aboriginal communities, the elderly who cannot move, and the poor who have nowhere else to go. The cheap housing prices in these towns are not opportunities. They are warnings. They are the market telling you something governments will not say directly. These places have been abandoned. Have you seen conditions in Australian towns that shocked you? Have you lived in or visited places where the gap between Australia's self-image and Australia's reality was visible? Comment below. These communities deserve to be seen. If you think this deserves more attention than it gets, share this video. Subscribe if you want more content that looks at Australia without the marketing spin. The algorithm rewards engagement, so every like helps this reach people who need to see it. The first step to fixing a problem is admitting it exists. Australia has a problem. It is time we talked about it honestly.